Game 7, Denver versus Minnesota. Let's go. Who else was rooting for a Game 7? Was it just me? Because I feel like I could not be the only one. This series has been all about momentum swings. Games 1 and 2, we all thought, or most of us thought, Minnesota just looked so dominant, like so overpowering. It didn't seem like Denver really had a chance. And then we watched games 3, 4, and 5, and then most of us just flipped our opinion to, whoa, does Minnesota have a chance? I honestly thought that like Denver pretty much looked like the defending champions as they are. And I did think Minnesota would win game 6, and I figured it was going 7 at this point. But it did really feel like Denver was going to overpower them in the end, and maybe they will in game 7, and get the series. Shout out to Jaden McDaniels. He was everywhere on defense, at least to start the game. You know, by the time it got into the third quarter, I mean, even before that, it was already a 20-point game. But by the time we got to the third quarter, you know, and stuff like that, it was kind of getting out of hand. So a little bit different. But like in the first quarter, he was everywhere on defense. I think he got like, don't quote me on this, but he definitely got at least 1 block in the first quarter, maybe 2. And the Timberwolves in general were swarming on defense. Like, you could tell they were ultra aggressive. And what's funny is they came out the game flat, like super flat, the way that they came out in the previous games. And so it looked like, wow, they have no fight in them, because it just looks like it's going to be another Denver blowout. And then they took that quick timeout, and from there they just rolled them. They just rolled Denver after that. Like, I don't know what they said in that timeout, but it worked, because they came out with super high energy. They were swarming on defense. Everybody did a great job on defense, and obviously their offense came along as well. Shout out to Mike Conley also. Mike Conley may not have scored 30 points this game, but his impact on the game was apparent, just because this is, you know, lends itself to something that I said maybe a couple of years ago. I made a video that we need more NBA veterans in the league, and we need to stop pushing them out just for young talent. And you can go back and watch that video to hear my full, you know, opinion and analysis. But I was basically saying it was crazy to me that I think it was about like Derek Favors not being in the league. Maybe Paul Millsap also, but I definitely feel like I said Derek Favors, because players who are veterans in the league, have been in the league quite some time, they have a role and they are important to teams, whether it's being Udonis Haslem as he was on the Miami Heat. He wasn't really playing, but he was a veteran, you know, leadership, present, all that stuff. Mike Conley is a veteran leader and presence on that team, but he also plays, so he also impacts the game in, you know, that regard. And why he's so important is he's like, I mean, again, I don't know, I'm not in the locker room, but he's like a calming force. He is someone who has so much playoff experience, and those kind of things matter. Those kind of things matter. Like, of course, young talent is always going to be something that is, you know, wanted in the league. And I'm not saying don't pick somebody up that's young and has promise. I'm just saying we shouldn't just push out the veterans just for young talent when they have a purpose as well. So shout out to Mike Conley, because I feel like he is kind of a big reason as to why they won this game, but not necessarily, again, in terms of like his points and stuff like that. Just him being on the floor makes it easier for them. Anthony Edwards was great. Karl Anthony Towns had his best game of the series. He still got in foul trouble, which is something he really needs to work on, because he cannot be in foul trouble every game. That is going to bite them in the butt eventually. Like, it hasn't yet, but that is going to be something they need to fix. Overall, Denver just looked flat after the, you know, start of the game. After that, they looked like really flat the way that Minnesota did to start the game. And they did have some wide open shots that they were missing, and that happens, and so we get that. But overall, it just seemed like Minnesota was super aggressive and Denver didn't really have an answer. And this is kind of, like I said, how the whole series has went. That's how the first 2 games went. Minnesota was ultra aggressive and Denver didn't really have an answer. And then again, games 3, 4, and 5, Denver was super aggressive and Minnesota like didn't have an answer. So I guess it really depends who's going to be more aggressive. So at this point, I'm not sure this series is going to be won by anything other than the team that is way more aggressive. Obviously, you have to make shots, and, you know, there's good players on both teams, and, you know, you have to play well. But I'm saying, like, the way that the Knicks play with hustling for loose balls and offensive rebounds and just swarming on defense, I feel like that's the way this series is going to be won. Who wants it more at this point? Because we're at game 7. both teams, there's pressure, and there's probably going to be, I don't think either team is going to shoot 70% from the field. So with that being said, I feel like it's going to come down to who's putting more pressure, on defense, who's, diving on the floor for loose balls, who's getting the second chance points. I don't know if the game is going to be close or if it's going to be a blowout. I actually have no clue. I have no clue how it's going to go. But I feel like whoever is the most aggressive, that is who's going to win. Whether that's to start the game and they set the tone early, kind of like how Minnesota did after the first time out, or whether it be after halftime. Whatever it is, whoever is going to be, I want this more, I feel like that's who's going to win. The last thing I'll say is I think Jamal Murray has to be big time in order for them to win Game 7. I guess there's always a chance that he doesn't have to be and they win anyway, but you know what I'm saying. I really think he's going to have a huge game, because I was having this conversation with someone before the series started, and I said the two X factors, in my opinion, were going to be Naz Reid and Jamal Murray. I forgot his name for a second. Because for me, Naz Reid, I feel like is an X factor in basically every series, the sixth man of the year. When he plays well, it's really hard to beat Minnesota, because he just gives them that scoring punch off the bench, can play some defense and all that stuff. But when Jamal Murray is cooking, it's hard to stop Denver, because then, the lane is open for all the other players and Jokic, and it's just an easier game for everybody. When Jamal Murray isn't making shots, of course you still guard him because he's Jamal Murray, but at the same time, they don't have that, X factor that they need, because Jokic, we saw him score 40 the other night, and he could do that, but he wants to be a distributor, and part of his assist that he gets is from Jamal Murray, the two-man game they have. And if that two-man game isn't working at that point, they're going to have to switch up how they're playing offense, at least for a little bit, and it could hurt them in the end. So I think Jamal Murray needs to have a big game for them to win, but we will see Game 7. I am excited.